and good morning, and thank you for attending our little webinar, which is titled Improving Your SaaS Competitiveness Using Disaster Recovery and Escrow Service. I'll just go to the agenda, which should be pretty agenda. I'll have a little bit of an introduction about Plan B disaster recovery, and the benefits of software as a service, what you offer as a service and what people get, the challenges that you are potentially likely to be starting to see, and potentially it'll be harder going forward with regard to getting more adoption to SaaS services. Looking at the SaaS supply chain and the problems that might present for some more reserved customers. Development in customer requirements as a result of some of those fragilities. And then I'd like to describe and give you some indication of what Plan B has come up with to help guys, which is called the Cloud Protector, which is all about continuity of service for your end customers and giving them the reassurances that they require if they were going to outsource their software applications. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to go through them with you. It'll probably take about 20 minutes, so hopefully it won't be gone too long. A little bit of introduction about Plan B. We're an IT disaster recovery business. We're a specialist in that. It's all we do. One thing that is unique about us is that we take the responsibility away from the customer. It's not a software cloud, it is a service. Part of that service is that we refresh our DR platform and cover it every day and test to make sure it works. In the unfortunate event that someone has a disaster, we know that we tested it the day before, and for that reason we guarantee a level or speed of recovery because it the day before. An independent organisation. We've got a number of accreditations regarding data security, and we tend to specialise in the more complex environments, networking requirements for medium to large customers. And we've got all sorts of environments, whether they're physical, virtual, or a mixed environment. I'll just go through a few of just give you an introduction of the sort of customers we look after. There's a few brands and logos there that you should be able to recognise. We also look after a number of SaaS providers. Say probably the people that we would expect most are in the legal, construction, finance sector. And we have learned from their experiences and questions that they've asked as to what some of the challenges that you might be facing going forward. Let's just go and take a look at what software as a service, what your proposition is to your customer. And this is a general thing that you guys, SaaS provider, the innovation, the specialization, and therefore the efficiency of a particular software. The benefits from product agility of the business and that will improve their competitiveness. So it's all the positive sides, but on the negative side, they do have a little bit of a trade-off, and that is loss of control over things like development updates and maintenance windows. There's a thing about data and data security, and the fact that you can't actually get hold of it if you wanted to. And also, there's a certain amount of lost in-house capability. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes not. One thing that's happened so far, and you'll experience is with the early adopters, they're happy to accept that trade-off. For all those benefits, they're happy to lose that level of control. The interesting thing is that going forward, the people who haven't gone on to SaaS and cloud solutions, the early and late majority, and they will be more challenged to convince them of losing that level of control, particularly about justifying how they can prove their compliance, and also of putting somebody else's data, which is sort of what cloud is, somebody else's data or your data on somebody else's computers. And it's interesting that we're at Cloud Expo last week. We were asked on a number of occasions, we were at the Disaster Recovery stand there, how can I back up from AWS, Azure, and any other cloud provider? So although people understand the resilience of the cloud, there are these questions now, and this is for providers rather than just the end customers. What happens if that cloud provider lets me down? And there are documented cases for that. Some large, some small, but they do happen. And in many cases, it's gone, including SaaS providers for that matter. So I think it's for certain, although it is a relatively new industry, the adoption rate for SaaS is likely to rise because of all the benefits that I mentioned earlier. And in a Clarinet survey of European customers that I think was issued last month, there is cases in certain countries where adoption of SaaS is far higher than in the UK. For instance, they came up with the survey that 50% of all applications are on-prem in the UK, but only 36 in France. It suggests the adoption levels are a lot higher in some of the European countries other than the UK, and I think Germany was very, very similar to the UK in terms of that. That was put down to the fact that the UK and Germany business environments, they do have a long prevailing attitude towards cloud security and data ownership and compliance. And I think particularly if we look into the UK, this is highlighted by the example of 2E2, which entered into administration, I think, in 2012, and is something that is reasonably front of mind. There were some big names that were affected, and it was fairly well documented how people who thought they had control of their data, of their contracts, were completely out of control. And what I feel is that the level of adoption is likely to increase, but there will be some winners and losers, and that will depend on how you can convince the new entrants into adopting our services to be happy and comfortable with using after their data. So look at a SaaS supply chain pyramid, and we've seen them where the whole pyramid belongs to one company. Maybe the hosting and infrastructure is done in their local offices. Many SaaS providers, all that's done through third parties, and they sit at the top of the chain, just providing services to customers and first, second line support. This is the pyramid of any managed service, to be honest. And the thing about a supply chain with SaaS is that they are real-time dependencies on each layer. And if one of those breaks, then the end customer, that's your customer, has no service. You lose in terms of customer satisfaction and potentially lose the customer for letting them down. So there is a very tight dependency. It's not like a sort of a supermarket supply chain where you can maybe bring in a competitor relatively easy to supply some of the goods. Just one person in the chain breaks and service down. For that, we have contracts. So you have a contract with your customers, and in turn, you have contracts with your suppliers, who have contracts with their suppliers, etc., etc. And that all works very well. But there is the fragility there that if, for instance, there was a financial problem with one supplier in that chain, what would happen? Because at the end of the day, all these contracts and SLAs don't work when a business is in administration. We've got to look at, and your customers will start looking at your suppliers and the fragility on a technical basis, but also on a financial basis. And the level of security or scrutiny is starting to come through. I'm not sure whether you're experiencing it, but certainly SaaS has taken off without too much scrutiny from the likes of lawyers. But if you look on the internet, there are many legal experts doing, 10 things you should think about, 10 things you should be concerned about, 10 questions you should ask your SaaS provider, all that sort of thing. Because they've started to understand that you can look through the supply chain in order in order to satisfy yourself how resilient the end provider actually is. They count the financial strength of their supplier, but also what does the rest of the supply chain look like from a financial point of view. So all the way down the chain. And remember, bigger doesn't necessarily mean safer. But at the end of the day, 2E2 were pretty much at the bottom of that supply chain to many customers. And they had a turnover of 430 million the year that they went down, and 2,000 staff. If you look at many of the financials of some of these independent service providers, the 1 to 500 million pound turnover businesses, they have an awful lot of debt and they aren't necessarily profitable. So these are questions that you will be asked by your customers. Looking down that, you need down that list the understanding the technical compliance and accreditations for each one of yourself and in the supply chain, understanding the subcontractors' resilience, their redundancy, what their disaster recovery situation or plan is, and how often that is tested, and to sort of gauge what quality of service they are getting if something untoward happens. And also, suppliers come and go quite often. What is the process if you need to move data center or swap out a subcontractor? The things that affect the end customer. And if I was a lawyer, let's say, who used my practice management system, I want to know what happened in my business if you have a small problem with your subcontractor. And then not only there's safeguards against insolvency, and that's insolvency for the SaaS provider, but also through that chain. What will happen? And I think we were asking at Cloud Exo, many customers do not have any safeguards at all with regard to insolvency of their SaaS provider, but something that they are starting to consider. And the reason why they should start considering this more regularly is, and in a bit more detail, is that SaaS has not really gone through a full business cycle yet. And the SaaS providers and the suppliers within that chain have not yet reached profitability. So until they do that and their business model is proven, then that's a risk to the end customer. What you need to do is be able to guard against and reassure the end customer that in the event of your failure or anybody else's financial failure, their service will continue. The thing is that it's a small community. The internet is a very, very connected world, and if you have one or two problems with other SaaS providers that leave customers hanging with no service, that will have those failures will have a reflect on your business. So you need to be prepared to meet all these obligations, irrespective of what may or may not happen. Sort of a good point for introducing what we think is a great solution for SaaS and cloud providers. It's called Plan B's Cloud Protector, and it's an all-in-one solution which covers your customers from unfortunate incidents, whether they be technical or financial disasters. day, we are a disaster recovery business. We have a solution which replicates to our data center and is tested to work on our data center every day. So that gives the standard reassurance that in a technical sort of disaster or problem, then their service will be easily migrated over to our platform, and they can just carry on business as normal, uninterrupted. We are able to help protect with regard to viruses and ransomware from spreading to a secondary location. And with you doing developments and upgrades, we can provide DR platform for a QAT pre-production testing phase against pretty much yesterday's full solution, so that when you do the deployment, you know, for instance, it's been tested on the equivalent of the live platform before you go live. The other thing from a technical point of view, which you might find interesting, is that if you think of the DR platform as a bit of a replica Aunt Sally that can be destroyed if for whatever reason you wanted to do that, you can robustly some vulnerabilities, scans, brute force attacks against the DR platform without impacting the platform, and that's something that is part of the Cloud Protector proposition. Now that's just the standard sort of DR technical threats that we're talking about, but this talk was more specifically around about escrow and what happens with regard to happens if there's a financial disaster anywhere on that supply chain. Now, what we're able to do is keep a customer's systems running, even if, for whatever reason, unfortunately, though that may be, you went out of business or went into administration. Because we can technically run service, that's not a problem, but we may not be able to run it for the benefit of your customers because of licensing or being able to have access to source code. Now, we are offering to do that in the event of a financial disaster, we have the capability through escrow agreement to run software which is independent of the administrator that would be running your business at the time, at an agreed price to your end customer and with an agreed SLA. To them, reassurance at the time they sign up with you that you are a safe pair of hands. So, and what we need to do is make sure that we have access or the ability to have access to IPR and source code for the benefit of your customers in that event. And that's something that we can do through an escrow agreement. The other thing and the final thing is that because we are a developer, are able to essentially look after a service for a reasonable length of time, let's say up to 6 months, a pair of hands to look after and keep your cloud up to date and working for the end customer. So let's look at escrow. Generally speaking, it's a legally binding agreement between your end customer, you, and a third party. That is that you deposit your software source code in this trusted third party, and they keep it safe and secure and confidential, hopefully forever. However, in the event that there is a release event, and this could be you going into administration, the trusted third party will give to some end customers that they have an agreement with the source code so that they can maintain and support the software. And that works very well, but it will well really for on-prem customers who just have the software, they just want to be able to update it and keep it supported themselves. And it doesn't work very well in a multi-tenant SaaS solution. So what's there to do? What I suggest is that is that if you have a Plan B escrow agreement with Plan B, we have all the data, we have all the systems available to be run on demand. What we then are able to do with our escrow agreement is to be able to carry on hosting and maintaining and supporting the SaaS platform because of agreement that will be given to us via this arrangement. So that we would be able to legally run the software and maintain it through access to the source code, which would be given to us in the event of you going into administration. And really the benefit, the way I take going over to you, what happens if you've got an answer? And what we do is we would agree to run the platform for a pre-agreed period of time, and that would depend on the type of software and whatever you wanted to offer to your customer. It could be a month, it could be 3 months, it could be a year. We would have to be comfortable that we would be able to do that. But something that will allow us to do two things for your customers, and one is to either migrate to another service or to their service in an orderly manner, or we could move the service on in its entirety to somebody else who might support it as an ongoing basis. Plan B has no ambitions to become a SaaS provider. All we want to do is be able to provide service which enables customers to carry on with their business using your software. And what that does, even if it doesn't go into practice, from the customer's point of view, they have some negotiating power with the administrator. And they are not necessarily, because they've got somewhere to go. Whereas if you take the example of the 2E2 administration, held to ransom. It's basically, if you don't pay us any money, we switch you off. And only the people with very robust business continuity plan, disaster recovery solutions were able to move quickly onto a different solution. And what that hopefully will be able to do is assure to your end customer a continuity of service. You have a technical disaster and a financial disaster throughout the whole of the supply chain that you and they depend upon. In terms of the benefits to your customer and to you, is you can offer them an independently tested and certified disaster recovery capability, which we think is very good, provide Plan B, because it is tested and certified on a daily basis, not once a quarter or once a year. This is every day we make sure it runs on our platform. It will reduce and lower the risks and viruses, ransomware and other security vulnerabilities, which should give them the reassurance that you are taking these threats seriously. It also gives you the ability to offer end user service even in the event of your financial disaster or one of the subcontractors. And what this will do is give you not just cost but a competitive advantage and be able to tell that against your competitors, that you are safer, safe set of hands to look after their services than you. I'd be more than happy to answer them. And there's a few of our sort of customer sort of logos there that I put on for you. I've got one question already, which is from Dan. That says, what sort of release events are there? That's pretty much up to you. It's the sort of standard escrow agreements that we can come up with. You tick various boxes, but there's insolvency, obviously. But there are other alternatives where you're incapacity release, and that's it for whatever reason the software owner is no longer able or capable of providing support. The material breach release as well. You can do other things like competitive takeover release and merger release. It's you really, but maybe the merger release is not necessarily what you're wanting. But specifically, I would probably recommend just go for something like insolvency. Yeah, okay. I've got another one from Jonathan. Can you support any software? I wouldn't like to say any software. We would have to sit down and understand what you do, but we would see what we have in skills in able to support this. We support the disaster recovery solution all the time. That's not a problem. And maybe maintaining and fixing is a little bit harder. So we'd have to make sure we had the skills in-house to be able to do that. But we're a generalist shop, so we should be able to provide services for most SaaS providers. Okay, I got one from Peter. If a release event occurs, does the end user own the software? No, not necessarily. What you can do is release a non-exclusive perpetual personal license just to them, and you can probably limit it to a period of time if you wanted to. That's up to you. That's all part of the, how we would put the escrow agreement in place. Oh, I've got another one. Can you cover only a subset of customers? Yes, I suppose we can. Each customer has to have an arrangement, and I think this is presumably said whether you want to sort of do this as a premium service. They have to be party to the agreement to get the license. So those who have bought it would get access to it. Who haven't, they wouldn't actually, if their escrow agreement wasn't working, then they would not be able to have that license transferred to them. So no. Yes, they do have to be specific to your end customer. They can go on a register rather than there's a specific contract for each, but they do need to be known so that the license fee can be issued to them. Anyway, that's probably about it. Thank you all for your time. I do hope you found this useful. My name is Ian Daly from Plan B Disaster Recovery. If you've got any questions, then please send me an email. I'm ian.daly@planb.co.uk, or perhaps you can find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Goodbye.